What is your purpose, passion, promise? What is your purpose, passion, promise? What is your purpose, passion, promise? You're the daughter of the Most High.
Welcome back to Divine Destiny. Today our topic of discussion is homosexuality. Christians, how are we handling it? We are not here today to condone, to condemn, or to persecute anyone. We're here to discuss the issues that others are afraid to discuss so that we can get to the next level in the kingdom. So Chastity, tell me, what are some of the issues that you felt that we've had to deal with, or as a Christian that you may have had to deal with, or even as a non-Christian?
Well, when it comes to homosexuality, I still believe today that it's still one of the biggest issues that divides the church, because either some want to deal with it, because of course you're going to have those who sit among us that are dealing with their sexual orientation, whether it's male or female, but then you have those that feel as long as we ignore it, that we don't have to deal with it. Right. And that's not the way, as far as going about how to handle it. Because you have people who are sitting in the congregation that want to be delivered, right, but they're just waiting on that message that calls them up, that would allow them to be delivered of whatever they're going through. Mm-hmm. But until we acknowledge it, then they're going to feel as if we don't want to deal with it. And right, some people choose not to deal with it because they fear that if they acknowledge it and talk about it, then some people may begin to question their faith or even their sexual orientation, because obviously if that's something they want to talk about, right, then maybe it's something that they've gone through, and it may not be the case. But my thing is with homosexuality, regardless of who it is, because I'm pretty sure in everyone's family they've had to deal with a family member that was going through that issue, because myself, in our family, it was something that everybody knew, but that didn't keep us from being around that person or loving them any less. Right. To us, that was their decision to make, and at the end of the day, we're going to still love them as a person, but not necessarily have to accept, their homosexuality behavior. Mm-hmm. And that made it so much easier in our family. Right. Because we acknowledged it, we know it's there. We can't run from it, because if we run from it, that means shutting out that family member who may be going through issues dealing with homosexuality. Right. And I just feel as if the church should take the same initiative to, like they say, love that person out of whatever they're going through. Right. And some of us don't do that. We just shun them out. We call them everything in the book, and we make them feel as if that's the worst sin ever. But the last time I checked, a sin is a sin regardless of what it is. Because at the end of the day, God is going to love that person regardless, because as human beings, we still have free choice. Right. But that doesn't make that sin any more bigger than the next. Right. So that's just how I feel about it. From the standpoint when it comes to family and the church, just acknowledging that it exists and dealing with it.
Right. I know that growing up, there were very few. I'm from a very small town in North Carolina, and there were probably, I would say, 2 men that we knew of, and I'm sure there may have been more people. But in having moved to Florida, and I remember the first time going to South Beach, and I just, I said, oh my God, like 1,000,000 times. But it's amazing how, because at that time, I was not saved. And when I changed my life, I didn't view them. I think that's why I always say the spiritual and the natural side. That how, when I was in the world, how I viewed them was almost like, I didn't, you really didn't want to be around it or anything. But once I got saved, I started to question myself, to say, no matter what the sin is, if a person is living with someone and they're not married, what difference is that sin, opposed to, what they're doing? And I had to say, no matter what anyone's doing, what type of sin they're in, you have to look at their heart. And my thing is, I see your soul, and where are you going to end up? And to me, that's the most important thing. And with church, I think a lot of people are afraid, and I think that some of the pastors even may want to accept it, but they're afraid for it just to be totally open and out to everyone. Because even if you accept it, how far do you go? Do you allow the heterosexual couple to maybe hold hands in church, and you might see some that may even kiss their mate, or the pastor may even kiss his wife? Okay, so if we accept this into the body, then what happens with that couple now that you have accepted? Is it a double standard? Mm-hmm. Are there boundaries set for them? Because this is not what the word says, but, you know, where are we going to go from there? And I think that that's where the fear factor, and it's the children, and it's what are the children seeing, and if you're teaching them Adam and Eve, and I see John and Mark, and they see them holding hands and being intimate and know that they live together, then I think that that's where all the confusion and fear comes from. I think the heart is there for a lot of people, but it's once you take this on, what do I do with it? Mm-hmm. You know, so do you have anything you want to say?
With me, growing up, of course, I knew that it was wrong and it wasn't right. Mm-hmm. And I think back before I was saved, I was very judgmental, and I would always see, you know, two people the same, and I would be like, oh, you know, that's nasty. How could they do that? I would never do that. And, you know, I would just sit up and I would gossip. Mm-hmm. And I would say, when I started high school, you know, I was seeing it more and more and more and more, and it was like a trend. So I just used to say, oh, well, you know, it's a phase, you know, maybe they'll grow out of it or whatever. And then I began to start having these feelings, like when I would look at a woman, and I didn't know where it was coming from, because I used to be like, oh, well, I'll never do this. So I found myself being attracted to women. Mm-hmm. And nobody that I knew of, or, you know, that I knew as far as family. You know, I tried to hide it. Because I knew it was wrong, but it felt right to me, you know, then. Mm-hmm. And I was embarrassed in the beginning, but then I was just like, okay, when I was with that person, I didn't care. You know, whoever seen me, if it was family, it was like, okay, but if it was anybody out in the public, I didn't care. You know, I would go out, we would do, you know, whatever. And then when I began to get back into the church after I had my daughter, I wanted to be delivered from it, but I didn't know how to go about doing it, because it's like I wanted to stop, but I wanted to continue. Mm-hmm. So when I began, I had, you know, I prayed about it, and I knew that I wasn't delivered. Mm-hmm. And I had two friends, and I desperately wanted them too to come out of this, because I was trying to come out of it myself. And, you know, we would come to church, and part of me would feel like people were looking at us funny, like, you know, wondering, oh, well, I wonder if they, you know, if they talk, or she messing around with them. But, you know, it bothered me, but then again, it didn't bother me, because I knew, you know, what was going on, even though these were my friends and we weren't, you know, dating or anything, like, but I knew that was inside of me. So I just always felt like, you know, people would be judgmental and not understand where I would be coming from. So I didn't know how to approach anyone and say, okay, this is what I'm dealing with, and, you know, how do I come out of this? What do I do? So I think it's more of people just being shamed and embarrassed to even confess it and to say it. And then, you know, it takes that first. You have to confess it. You know, you have to be real with yourself, and then that's when, you know, deliverance can take place. So.
And just to go back to what you were saying earlier, as far as acceptance, it's not so much accepting their lifestyle, their behavior, but more or less acknowledging that homosexuality is in the church, and to acknowledge it, because like she was saying, you know, she had a hard time, you know, talking about it and discussing it. But if we open up, you know, communication to where people who are seeking deliverance